Hello and welcome to episode 8 of Metuchen the Past. Although at this point, we may need to consider a rebrand because, like our last guest, today's guest is very much about the present and the future, in addition to a little bit about the past. So my name is Dr. James Farley, and today's guest is someone whose career spans organized crime prosecutions, criminal justice reform, best-selling books, national media, and academia. This gentleman has served as an assistant U.S. attorney in the Southern District of New York, where he was a prosecutor and the deputy chief of their organized crime unit. He later spent 6 years as the director of New Jersey's Division of Criminal Justice. He's the author of not one, not two, but 3 national best-selling books, and he currently is the senior legal analyst for this small upstart news outlet called the Cable News Network, or CNN. Hey, you got to start right somewhere. You got it right. you got to start somewhere. CNN, the senior legal analyst. And he teaches, based on my research, national security teaches at Rutgers University on national security and prosecutorial ethics. Is that correct?
You got it. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Well, so first of all, I love that this is a podcast about Metuchen's past. I am very interested in history, especially local history. But I guess I do. I moved here 20 years ago. Yeah. So I guess I count as past and present and future.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, a lot's changed in 20 years, right? If you walk downtown, you'll see it.
Oh my gosh, a lot's changed in 10. Yeah. For sure, absolutely. And so, without further ado, many of you know him, and he's just an awesome guy. Elie Honig, welcome to the show, man.
Thank
I really
you.
appreciate
it. Thank you for having me. We met at the Y.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Where you and your brother are the kings of the Y. I'm not going to tell you which one's my favorite.
Who has the best hair, though? Huh?
Dan's got you beat with the hair.
It's got me beat with the hair.
But look, it is a local thing. I mean, people, this is part of what I love about this town. You meet people, you know, you go downtown, I know the people who own most of the restaurants and stores down there. You go to the Y, you know the guy at the desk, you know the guy who, and it's that kind of town where if you get out there, it's really easy to meet people and build these relationships. So.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it is really cool, and that's part of why I love it and why I've been here 200 years. When I first moved in here, a Velociraptor. But I've been here a long time, since the early 80s. So let's get right into the question. So this question is an interesting one.
Okay.
We've had some excellent guests on this podcast. Mm-hmm. Some really nice people with great stories and great ties to Metuchen. We've never had somebody up to this point that has had their own Wikipedia page. Oh. I've always wondered.
Oh no!
Do you when this happens? Is it something you make yourself?
It's a great question.
Does Wikipedia call you?
So no. So here's the thing. I know people who have tried to get their own Wikipedia pages created. I know somebody who hired a firm to create this person's own Wikipedia page, and it was up, and it looked good, and they took it down real quick. Because they just decided the person wasn't, didn't merit a Wikipedia page. So they're really good at policing themselves. No, there came a point when I'd been doing this for a couple years, I was like, gee, I wonder if I'll get a Wikipedia page. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure I found out from my dad, who was ecstatic.
That's crazy.
That said, there have definitely been several, it just pops up, no one notifies you. But A, there have been several errors through the years, and B, people use it as a way to try to be abusive. But Wikipedia has gotten really good at it. Like when people sometimes see me on air, they'll go into my Wikipedia page and write, this Zionist, Hebrew will, but they're pretty good about
That went dark quick.
No, I mean it's been worse than that. But they're pretty good about policing that and taking it down. So at any given moment, it may be accurate or inaccurate. By and large, it's accurate what's in there.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I haven't looked at it in a bit, but I have definitely seen it.
So it really is just one day you've made it and it's there.
Yeah, someone decides. I don't know. There's last time I looked, there was like out of date stuff that was annoying me. But,
No, hey. And do you have the power to edit that if you like to?
I guess. Yeah. I mean, no. The answer is I don't know how to do that, but Wikipedia is just run by normal people, so there's normal people out there who could. I should probably hire someone to go in and update it. It says I have 2 bucks. It's like, no, I have 3. Someone just
It's like, I worked so hard on that
Wikipedia customer service or something.
Yeah, absolutely. So early life, I read that your father, Mr. Murray Honig, he's an attorney, and you actually attended his graduation
Good research.
At 2 months of age. So how was that graduation? Did it really?
I've been told I ruined it. I've been told I cried the whole time. I mean, look, I was born in April of 1975, so I'm 50.
Right.
For those of you at home doing the math.
And if he's on TV, so you can see him, but he looks fantastic. He's got a head of hair that I'm envious of. I'm just a couple years younger than him. He looks amazing. But anyway, continue.
My dad was a Rutgers third-year law student, Rutgers Camden, and so his graduation would have been in May or June of that year. My mom says she was holding me. I was a very difficult baby, apparently, as was my son. So that was my first ever Rutgers event that I attended.
Wow,
and I kind of ruined it.
That's all good. It's good. 2 months of age, already off to a good start. Yeah, that's great. But what's interesting, before college, I read you had no interest in becoming a lawyer initially. What changed?
Well, I guess I would say it this way. People sometimes ask me in these type of settings, well, did you want to become a lawyer because your dad? And the answer is the opposite. And no knock on my dad. But because I saw him, I understood that being a lawyer is a grind. It's not LA law. It's not Few Good Men. You know, for people who are our age will know what I'm talking about.
That's a reference.
But it wasn't all glamour and glitz. And I saw my dad is a real lawyer. My dad can do things I can't do. My dad can do a will. He can do a real estate purchase. He can do a divorce. He can do a tax lien. I wouldn't even know where to begin. I would just refer you to him. But I saw how hard he worked, and I saw that it was a grind. He was mostly on his own, or would have one or two partners at various times. And the story I tell is, I always remember that my dad had a house, a residential house, but it was zoned for business. Some of the houses here for doctors' offices, that kind of thing.
Yeah, sure.
And when it rained, like today, the basement would flood of that house. And sometimes people would the secretaries or whoever would run down there and just move the boxes around to get them off the floor. And every once in a while, he would hire me. I remember there was one time in particular, he hired me. And the files had been all splayed out. And I had to spend 2 days in the moldy basement going through and just reorganizing and alphabetizing hundreds and hundreds of files. And I will still tell you, I remember I got paid $15 a day. Yeah. This is probably 86 or 87, so I'm probably 11 or 12, and I thought I was the world's richest man. I mean, I had $30 at the end of 2 days.
Joe, G.I. Joe.
I bought a cassette, I bought baseball cards, all the stuff that you or I would have purchased. But I mean, I just say that to illustrate that I was very aware of the grind of being a lawyer, and when I made the decision to, even when I went to college, I wasn't sure it was what I wanted to do, but when I went to college, I went to Rutgers here in New Brunswick, and I started taking classes that I loved, and I had a professor in particular, Milt Heumann, who still teaches there. I love him. We taught classes next to one another last semester. It was great.
Wild, yeah.
And he really sparked my interest, and I got an internship through his program with the Middlesex County Public Defender, so I was going into jails and watching trials at the courthouse in New Brunswick, and I was, I had that flipping of the switch moment where this is what I want to do.
Wow, that is amazing. Yeah. And so and you really did have that flipping of the switch because you obviously you did fantastic in undergrad because you got into Harvard Law School, which is, Harvard. It's amazing.
Well, let me say, Harvard was the first time I ever went to anything other than a New Jersey public school.
Interesting.
Right? Because I'm from Cherry Hill, so I'm from South Jersey. Let me just explain this.
Right.
And you know this, but this is a very important thing you need to know about me. I am an Eagles fan. I am a Phillies fan.
Anyway, that's all we have time for. And, Elie,
Well, people sometimes, when they interview me, go, what are you, a Jets, Giants? I'm like, no. But I went to Cherry Hill Public Schools, K through 12. I went to Rutgers, our state university. And so Harvard was the first time I ever, not stepped foot on, but first time I ever went to a private school. Yeah. And I loved it. I mean, there would be, not a day would go by where I would, wouldn't think to myself, I can't believe I'm at Harvard freaking law school. Yeah. But you know what? But the thing is, it was normal people. Like the people not everyone, there was freaks, of course. But there's freaks everywhere. But the people who I became friends with, who I lived with, it may have been, probably not coincidence, but all the state school kids, like the house of guys that I ended up living in my second and third year went to Cal Berkeley, Ohio State, Michigan, Rutgers for me. Oh, Williams. There was one private school, fancy boy.
Okay, yeah.
But I mean, I felt very lucky to go there, and I absolutely had just the time of my life there.
That is awesome. Yeah. That is awesome. And so, you finished there after having the time of your life. And again, I visited it once too. Did not attend, but it really is a beautiful area. And you worked at, coming out of school, Covington and Burling in Washington?
You got it. Yeah.
All right, yeah.
A great firm. It was never my goal to be a long-term 30 years at a law firm. There's obvious reasons you would and wouldn't want to do it. You would want to do it for the money. I mean, it pays great. It's a great place to start. It's a very common place to start coming out of law school. You get good training. I met wonderful people there who I'm still friends with. But the plan was always to go there for a few years and then get a prosecutor job if I was lucky enough to up here. And I will tell you a funny thing. I still have great relationships there. But I was walking into our building, our CNN building in Manhattan a year or so ago, and there was a sign up, and it said, "New tenants coming soon, Covington and Burling." So I just took a picture and sent it to my wife. I said, "I can't escape these guys."
That's right. You're in good company, though. Eric Holder, Paul Tagliabue, I think, went there, too. There was another one that I don't have.
I have a Tagliabue story for you. You want to hear this?
I would love to.
When I was there, so the NFL, Paul Tagliabue, people may know, was the commissioner of the NFL, National Football League, but he had come from Covington, and he was a big partner at Covington. Covington does a lot of work for the NFL. I got to do a little bit of NFL work when I was there too.
That's cool.
And so once a year or so, Tagliabue would come up and we'd have a big formal firm-wide luncheon honoring, he was commissioner of the NFL at the time, massively powerful. And he took, one year they said, okay, we'll take questions now. And one of our summer associates, so, the lowest level, people who are trying to get hired there, raises a hand and says, Commissioner Tagliabue, I'm wondering if you've ever done any kind of internal study on how much of the viewership of the NFL is based on fantasy football and gambling. And there was, in the room, there was like you can't ask that. And it was much more taboo at the time. Now it's like every game is brought to you by FanDuel. But at the time, it was totally, there was just this gasp in the room, you just said that to Paul freaking Tagliabue. But Eric Holder, Paul Tagliabue, other dignitaries. Yeah, there was all sorts of people. People would be, former senators and members of the cabinet would come through there. Yeah, it was that kind of place.
Yeah. And then, speaking of the NFL, and I didn't even have this in my notes, but I remember reading it, post 9/11.
Yeah.
There was with getting into stadiums. And
my God, have I talked about that somewhere?
No, I saw that in one of the articles.
Yeah, I guess I have talked about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so well, I guess you did, in the article. But I was, my family had Giant season tickets forever, and I remember those long lines and, the different things with the state troopers and the past. What was that experience like?
I was at Covington in Washington, D.C. on 9/11. I mean, at some point I Googled this, but we were 2 miles from the Pentagon. It was chaos. There was smoke, all that. But one of the jobs that I ended up being given was to write the disclaimer language that would go on the back of the Super Bowl ticket. Now, again, this is back when there were actual tickets, which I miss, right?
Yes, I do miss those.
A little piece of cardboard. They don't. Now it's just a thing on your phone.
Yeah.
Because basically my instruction from the league was, we want to go as far as humanly possible in searching people without overtly violating their constitutional rights. Yeah. And so, if you look at the back of the language on the tickets, it ends up being by entering the stadium, I consent to everything. And I will not sue anybody.
Break out the white gloves.
You can probe me if you want. But, and for 2 or 3 years in a row, when I would write I think it was 2 years in a row, when I would write the ticket language, a couple months after the Super Bowl, the NFL would send me as a thanks, a ticket, ensconced in, plexiglass or something, like a ceremonial thing to put on your desk. And I was like, you guys think you can get me a ticket before the game at some point?
That's a good one. No, we can't. Anyway.
Yeah, no, they were not for you. Yeah, right. You're a second year at Covington. Calm down.
That is awesome. Hey, but it's second year from Harvard, so that should draw a little bit of water. So then after Covington and Burling, you went in to become a federal prosecutor.
Yeah.
And that is really interesting. So your very first case, so from what I understand, it was very simple, clean possession case, quick and easy, wrapped up in a week, and you were on your way. Is that how it went down? No, exactly. Right, okay, so
let me preface this by saying it was really hard to get hired at the Justice Department, and I guess you could look at my resume or my Wikipedia page and be like, oh, it's just been linear. But there was a lot of rejection and failure along the way. I mean, I'll give this as an example. My wife and I, my now wife and I, were living together, or not together, but we were both in D.C., and the plan was we'll move up here, we'll get hired. We both wanted to be at DOJ. She is a year ahead of me in law school. She got hired at the New Jersey U.S. Attorney's Office in Newark. That's why we moved here to Metuchen. Metuchen because we wanted a place that would be accessible to Newark and New York and maybe Philly. Now, my first choice was to try to get hired in the Philly U.S. Attorney's Office. And I thought I would get in. I'm from there, Harvard, whatever. And they rejected me. And then I applied to the Brooklyn U.S. Attorney's Office. The Eastern District didn't get in there. And then I applied to the Southern District. And just because, which is traditionally seen as the most difficult to get into, but it just happened that the U.S. attorney there just kind of, we vibed when we met. And he liked me. And he thought I was his kind of guy. And so I got hired there. But that was not the plan. The plan was to sort of wind up back in the South Jersey, Philly area. And so I was incredibly lucky to get that job, and that's why we stayed.
Yeah. No, it's great. And I like that you said that it wasn't just, that there was a lot of trials and tribulations.
I tell students this all the time, like, especially students now, and I teach, undergrads at Rutgers, high achieving kids.
Yeah.
And especially now more than, you and I are the same age, but more than when we were students, the pressure put on these students are self-imposed to like have it all mapped out, and it has to be done this way. And after my sophomore year in college, I have to have this internship, and then I have to get this score on the LSAT. It's ridiculous. And I always try to stress to them that you're not going to be able to have it all mapped out now. Things are going to happen unexpectedly, for better or worse. There will be rejection. Nobody gets anywhere without a lot of rejection, and myself included.
Yeah, absolutely. Great message. Great message. You said that your supervisor you vibed with there, was that Mr. Richard Sullivan?
Well, so Dave Kelly was the U.S. attorney who I was referring to.
Oh, I see.
But Rich Sullivan was my supervisor on my first ever trial, who I write about in the first book.
Yes.
And Rich is now a federal appellate judge on the Second Circuit. So he's a heavy hitter.
He's a very heavy hitter.
And I love Rich. Okay. The funny thing is, so in the first book, I open with a scene from my first trial. And I'm this scared 29-year-old trying my first federal case. And Rich is this, by this point, grizzled veteran of the U.S. Attorney's Office. And Rich is, as I say in the book, I say something like he was loyal and demanding and tough and knew his stuff and all this. And I open with him like, I walk into the room and he says, what the hell are you wearing? I'm about to give my first jury address. And I said, what do you mean? I'm wearing the blue, all the things, navy suit, red tie. He goes, those shoes, there's no laces. They were kind of like, loafers, but like no laces. He's like, I was like, what? No laces? What? He's like, get shoes with laces for tomorrow. So there's 3 or 4 pages in the book about Rich. And then I saw him, Judge Sullivan, at a bar event that I was speaking at. This is a couple years ago. And they seated me next to him. And I love this guy, but I'm still terrified of him. And I was scared that he would be mad at what I wrote, because it's overwhelmingly positive, but I accurately paint him as being tough and demanding. And he loved it. I actually read a snippet of it to the crowd, and I was just watching him. The crowd loved it, but he had a huge smile on his face. I said, "Oh, good, thank God."
That is so awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
But so with Judge Sullivan, he had said that he was quoted as saying your first trial, and I was being a bit facetious. Yeah. I was like, easy first trial, you get right through it. He said if he had a first trial as difficult as yours, he would have left the firm. Is this true? Like, yes. What happened?
This thing ended up being such a train wreck. It was it seemed like a fairly straightforward scenario where the NYPD had stopped 3 guys in the car. And they all had badges, fake police badges, and guns on them, which is a fairly typical scenario for these guys who would pretend to be cops and they would rob drug dealers, right?
Wow,
because, you run into a building, there's drugs there, you say police, and then you take their drugs. What are they going to do? Call the real police? You know what I mean? Yeah. But there were so many complications. They got so drawn out. I'll just tell you one thing that drew it out. The defense lawyer, a couple days in, fell into a manhole while walking her dog and broke her orbital socket of her face.
I didn't know that could happen.
And basically said if she had needed surgery, we would have had to stop the trial and call a mistrial and start it all over a few weeks later. But she said, no, Judge, I'm not going to, a couple days later, she said, I'm not going to need surgery, but I have to wear these. So she wore these like wraparound blackout shades in the courtroom while doddering around with like a what's it called? Like a point, a cane kind of
to
thing.
help you navigate.
Yeah, exactly. And it was like, oh my God, the sympathy factor with this woman.
Oh my goodness.
We got a mixed verdict. We convicted him on a gun count and an obstruction count, and he was found not guilty. I say in the book, the way the verdict came out, the first count was robbery or conspiracy to commit robbery, and it was not guilty. And I say in the book, I thought, oh my God, I'm horrible. I'm going to get fired. You don't get fired for losing a trial, but I was like devastated. And then we got him on the remaining counts, which was enough. Yeah. But it was a good introduction to, one thing that I do say when I talk about sort of what I do on TV. Anyone who ever tells you a case is a slam dunk or a smoking gun has never actually tried a case, because any case that goes to trial is going to have a really skilled defense lawyer on the other side. Nothing is as straightforward as it seems. Any piece of evidence can be undermined or attacked. And so if you ever hear anyone say it's a smoking gun or the nail in the coffin, you can dismiss that person.
Yes, and so I'm a big true crime fan, and so I listen to certain things, and sometimes they'll be like, there's a lot of circumstantial evidence, but overwhelming. But then they'll be in the trial and be like, they were hoping that it wouldn't, they'll get a conviction. I was like, why wouldn't they get a conviction? Sometimes they don't. So to your point, that is really that's an interesting.
Yeah, but that trial should have been about a week, and it took a month or more, if I remember right. Yeah.
Wow.
Disaster.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. But I give you.
I'll just tell you one other quick thing.
Go for it.
Rich was very old school, and at one point, the defense lawyer who I mentioned before was really antagonistic. Her whole thing was like in everyone's face, fearless. She was sort of an old school. She would describe herself. She passed away a few years ago, but she would describe herself as like an old school angry hippie, right? And
wait, that's an oxymoron.
Yeah. She actually, her name, I can say her name was Liz Fink, and she married a guy who she met because she represented him in the Attica prison uprising. Okay, so Liz was super abrasive. That was her thing, but she fought really hard for her clients. And at one point, a couple days in, she was, antagonizing us after not in front of the jury, but, at the end of the trial day. And I just sort of turned to her and I snapped a little bit. Like, I don't remember what I said. I don't think I used profanity, but I think I was like, will you shut up or something like that.
Wow.
And Rich, so we get back into the trial room and Judge Sullivan, Rich says to me, don't you ever lose your patience like that in a courtroom. I don't care if the jury's there or the judge is there or it's just us. That is unbecoming. And I was like, I apologize. You are correct. So fast forward a couple weeks. Now we're at week 3 or 4 of the trial and she's wearing everyone down. And we were on the elevator and Liz Fink turns to us and calls us Nazis. And Rich, Judge Sullivan, loses it on her. Profanity. And when she gets off the elevator, I turn to him and he goes, I know.
You weren't in the courtroom. So, hey, you guys.
I know. I'm violating my own rule here. I said, listen, she called us Nazis. It's okay. Yeah.
And that's, wow. And we'll talk a little bit about that, like your background. So that's especially, like, are you kidding?
Yeah, right. Exactly. To say that to.
Yeah. That's insane. After that experience, and it's, and you had said that what your father did was a grind. But did you ever think after this, like, wow, maybe I should stick with, like my dad, real estate, tax law. Let me go work with him and be less stressful. Did you ever?
No, he always made clear to me he'd be more than happy to have me, move in with his firm. I just wasn't down there geographically. And my dad is a huge supporter of what I do now. Although, like I said, nothing makes him happier than when I need to. So, when you're in media like this, a lot of what I do is write down my wheelhouse, right? Stuff about criminal law or federal law or Supreme Court or whatever. But once in a while, I'll have to, I remember there was a time I had to do something about the nuances of bankruptcy law for Anderson Cooper's show. And I don't know bankruptcy law. So I called my dad. It's an hour before the show. I said, okay, Dad, I need the 5-minute version of bankruptcy law, and he gave it to me, and I said, I got it, and I went out there, and
that's really it's all right.
Sorry. Okay.
No worries. So
okay.
Yeah, no, that's it. Wow, that's a crunch time,
That's a rookie mistake, by the way, that I didn't have my phone off.
No,
I've never had my phone ring while I've been on air. I just want you on CNN. So okay, now it's off.
Dad, I feel honored. It's happened. If it ever comes up in a future interview, you could be like, well, there was the one time.
Well, it's funny. It did happen one time. I was on set with another person, a different person. And her phone rang, and I was pissed because I was like, people are going to think that's my phone. And at the end of the segment, the anchor said, her name is Jen. The anchor said, okay, Jen, you can answer your phone now. I was like, thank you for clarifying that it was Jen's phone, not mine.
Yeah. No, that's funny. And again, I think that's just a testament, though, just to your determination and your work ethic. And, you really did find your niche with what you're doing in your profession. So shortly after that, you got into organized crime, prosecuting.
Well, wait, are you afraid? Okay, yes, prosecution.
Yeah, sorry, you were a henchman for the. I'm not going to make it.
That would be horrible.
But you built a reputation as one of SDNY's top organized crime prosecutors. I want to read some of these. This is pretty good. So we have former U.S. Attorney Preet Bharara, my fault.
Jersey guy too, by the way.
Yeah. Oh, very cool. Yeah.
Yep.
He once called you organized crime's worst nightmare, which is
I love that.
That's something right there. You prosecuted over 100 mobsters and associates, including figures like Ciro Perone, the Genovese acting boss, Matthew.
Matty the horse, Iannello. Yep, I got it.
You've heard of him.
Yep.
You've heard of him. Whenever you go against someone like Matty the horse, it's like, that's a tough night.
Well, there were different rumors as to why they called Matty the horse Matty the horse. One of them was that he punched like a horse. Like apparently he got in a fight when he was a kid.
That's what.
And someone said, "Oh, that guy punches like a horse." What's your rating on this? Is it PG rating?
It's PG-13.
The other theory was that it alluded to a certain part of his anatomy.
Okay. Oh, you liked horse. Oh, that part of the.
We couldn't verify either.
Yeah. We don't want to verify that, but good. I didn't even think of that. It's like, why do they call him the horse? So there's a ton of mafia cases. And at one point, I had them all like listed. I was like, okay, but that was
so many of them. Yeah.
So, what was your first mafia case, and what do you remember about walking into the court knowing that you were prosecuting organized crime?
Well, so the reason first of all, the way it works in the SDNY is your first year you're in general crimes, just like we called it the freshman dorm. You get the lowest level, whatever comes down, you handle.
Yeah.
Second year, you go to narcotics. So you're starting to do bigger cases, wiretaps, 6, 8 defendant cases, 10 defendant cases, with usually some violence involved as well. After that, there's 6 or 7 senior units, and there's this sort of gray market where some of the units are recruiting you, and you may want to go to unit this, but not that unit. And I really wanted to go to organized crime because I just thought it would be the coolest thing. I thought the stories were incredible, and I would go watch the trials, and this is like stuff out of Sopranos and Goodfellas. I would go watch Frankie Fabiano take the stand and point out his captain, and I would watch Mikey Scars take the stand. And so I got into that unit. The first trial I did, now it's not all glory. The first trial I did was probably the hardest one. That was the names you just gave, Matty the horse, Ciro Perone. It was 20-some defendants, the whole leadership of the Genovese family. There's 5 families. The Genovese is sort of they used to jokingly call it the Ivy League of the mafia because they're the smartest, relatively speaking. They made the most money. They tended to be the most secretive. They had the fewest people who flipped, so they were hardest to penetrate. But the case was already coming up on trial by the time I got put on it. And a sure sign that your case, if you're a prosecutor, if there's any prosecutors out there, a sure sign that a case is a dog is if the other prosecutors are finding reasons to get off of it. And so several other prosecutors were like, oh, I have to do a different trial. I'm off this because it was a dog. It was not a glamorous case. There was no murder charge. There was barely any violence. There was 1 or 2 beatings or something. It was mostly a gambling and loan sharking case. It was mostly based on these sort of fuzzy tapes. We had put a wiretap in a table at Don Pepe's restaurant in Queens, but the recording quality was really bad. You're in a restaurant. There's silverware clanging. And I should have known when I was supposed to be the number 3 person on that trial. It was supposed to be one of my unit chiefs, a senior person, and then me. And about a couple weeks before trial, the unit chief calls us into his office and goes, guys, I have too much other stuff I have going on. So you're going to be the number 1, and you're going to be the number 2, and it's just going to be you 2. And I was like, oh, man.
Wow.
And so we tried that case. We ended up trying 4 of them, 4 of the defendants led by Ciro, and we overtried the case. It was way too long. We put in way too many crappy recordings, and the jury ended up, it was a good lesson, they acquitted 2 of the 4 and then hung, meaning they couldn't reach a unanimous verdict on the other 2, including Ciro, who was the only important one in the case. He was a capo, he was 85 years old, very powerful guy. Yeah. And so we then retried just Ciro Perone a month or 2 later. We cut the case down from a 3-month case to a 2-week case. We cut it down. I remember we played 90 recordings in the first one. We cut it down to the 14 best for the second one, convicted him like that. Wow. So the lesson was just get to the damn point, right? And so, that was my first case. But, I would go on to do murder cases, multiple murder cases, extortion cases, RICO. I mean, you name it. I did it all. But the first one was probably the least glamorous. I remember when I did the night before you give a jury address, sometimes you'll gather in a conference room and you'll run through it. You'll rehearse it, and people will give you feedback. And I remember I sort of gave the opening, and my unit chief, who wasn't really tuned in, said, well, why don't you open with some violence? Like, that'll be more exciting. And I was like, I wish we had some. He was like, what do you mean? I'm like, we have 1 beating of some schnook, it was fine. So so that was the least glamorous case I did.
It was, but it had something that really stuck out to me with that was that after the trial with Ciro Perone, I don't know if you remember this. So he approaches you outside the courtroom and he says, "Mr. Honig, no hard feelings. You did a good job,
kid."
Yeah.
So Ciro, so you know what happens sometimes in the courtroom setting is you're sort of like Stockholm syndrome-y because you're living in close, not living, but you spend all day in the courtroom and you're 6 feet away from these people. Some of them want to joke around with you, "Hey kid, how you doing?" And sometimes I would have friendly-ish banter with the defendant, sometimes not. Ciro was old school. Ciro didn't do that crap. Ciro wouldn't plead. That's why we went to trial. He was very, very old school. And he never said a word to me. And so we go through these 2 trials that I just laid out. The second trial, he's 85 years old. Jury has now found him guilty. And he had been out on bail. And so the judge says, "We're going to take a quick break. And then we're going to come back and discuss Mr. Perone's bail status." Now, we all understand what that means. I, as the prosecutor, am going to say, "Judge, now that he's been convicted, I want him sent to prison pending sentencing." And he might not ever get out. He's 85 years old. This could be his last 10 minutes of freedom that he ever has. And so the judge says, "All right, 10-minute break, whatever." I go out, I use the men's room. I come back in, and Ciro's waiting for me at the inside of the courtroom with his lawyer. And it was unusual. And I said, "Oh." And he just, he put out his hand and he said, "You did good, kid. No hard feelings," or something like that. And I said, "All right." And then I'll tell you this, he got 5 years. And you don't want, let's put aside murder cases. This was not a murder case. If it's not a murder case, I don't want the guy to die in jail. I want a person to have a chance of life on the other side. And he got it. This is a classic Ciro move. He goes in, he does his 5 years, he gets out, and he dies like 6 months later. But he was not going to die in prison. So as you can tell, I have an odd respect for the guy.
Yeah, I do. And I picked that up in the research. Yeah. You're like, I'm really glad he got out.
Well, let me be clear, though. I don't at all glamorize the lifestyle. I know what it is. But I do respect all of my defendants. I did respect all as human beings. And yes, I got a lot of convictions and got a lot of guys locked away for a long time. But I never took personal joy in it. I did it as a job. I never made it personal with them. I was a tough prosecutor, but I never wanted to annihilate a person's soul.
Right. And so speak to that, and you didn't here. Like, I want to be very clear on that one. But his Perone's attorney had said, he was like, I felt like he was overzealous with going for this, and being that he was of advanced age. Do you ever, when you're prosecuting, when you do develop not a respect, but you respect the humanity, and do you ever feel conflicted? There's a lot of scenario. Look, sentencing is always the hardest thing because the trial's over or the person has pled guilty, and let's put aside the mob cases because I had a little bit of a harder time feeling bad for them because they did it to themselves. They chose that life, right? And so when they would bring in the kids and the wife would be crying and be like, "Oh, come on." Like, the wife knows what he's doing. You know what I mean? But earlier in my career, there's one case I remember, and I still remember the guy's name. You can, this is public record, but his name was David Gonzalez. And we had caught him basically transporting drugs and guns to a warehouse in Pennsylvania that had something like 500 guns and some hundred numbers of kilos of coke. You're talking like an arsenal. And he was looking at a massive amount of time, and he was going to get a massive amount of time no matter what. But I remember he had 2 or 3 kids there who were, kids, 7, 8, 10 years old. And I remember feeling really bad for the kids, right? He did that to them. I didn't feel bad for David Gonzalez necessarily, right? But I felt really bad for those kids and the wife who did not ask for this. I could imagine that and seeing that.
But you can't let it paralyze you. You have to do your job, but you also don't do your job in an overly aggressive way.
Right. So, right. Absolutely. Yeah. Now, after the Perone case, I'm not sure how many cases you worked on in between this.
I would, yeah.
I'm going to the one that everyone will know that I jumped out at me. Wait. It's Gotti. Okay, you got it. 2009, John Jr. Gotti, the son of John Gotti.
Right, I'm glad you clarified that.
Yeah.
Senior was already long dead. Senior died in the 90s.
Yes, sure, absolutely. Teflon Don. Mm-hmm. So racketeering and murder charges. And it was his 4th racketeering trial in 5 years.
Well, but that's very relevant. So let me tell you the story. So when I talked about earlier going to the courthouse to watch Michael DeLeonardo and Frankie Fab, that was that trial. Oh, wow, so my office, when I was a kid, when I was brand new, I had nothing to. I was in the first year, second year unit. I was not yet in organized crime. They tried John Gotti Jr. 3 times, and all 3 times the jury hung. And after the third one, we dismissed the case. You can try, if a case hangs, you can try it a second time, maybe a third time, but definitely not after that. Fast forward 3 or 4 years, now I'm in the organized crime unit, and I've done all these big, successful Gambino and Genovese cases. And the federal prosecutors in Florida, in Tampa, Florida, decide we're going to take a run at Gotti. And they flipped a new cooperator, and they developed some new evidence. But
John Elie?
Yeah.
Yes,
Fun fact,
okay,
John
yeah.
Elie was a cooperator who I worked with, who is now a member of the Englishtown, New Jersey. So half hour from here, city council or town council.
He's
It's amazing. Yeah. I interviewed
him.
John Elie on SiriusXM about 6 months ago because he has such a fascinating story. But
that is a fascinating
So they
story.
flip Elie, and Elie was a psycho. He'll tell you, he did murders. He, as I said to him, he was the first person I heard use the word baseball bat as a verb. As in, I baseball batted that guy.
He's a councilman now.
Yeah, he is. No, he said he's going to run for Congress. I mean, he's, God bless him. But anyway,
sure.
So Florida says, well, we've developed this new case. It was 50% the case that my office had already done and 50% new stuff. And so Gotti gets arrested in New York because that's where he lives. And the rules say you have to have your first bail hearing in the district where you're arrested. So I knew this was coming. They were using some of my cooperators. I was helping them. I was sending them info, which was perfectly fine. And I was like, God bless. Like, you idiots want to do a fourth trial on this guy? Good freaking luck.
Yeah.
So I do the bail argument. It was it was the packed courtroom. It was the first time I did a case where it was like packed with media. And we got him locked up on bail. And I thought, oh, great. That'll be my little footnote in Gotti history. Well, what does he do? His first move, a smart tactical move, is to ask to have his case transferred from Florida back up to New York. Now, it's really difficult to win those cases. And I was like, oh, my God, he better not win this because I don't want this. I know it'll land on my desk, and I don't want this. So my FBI agent, I just talked to him the other day, he's a good friend of mine, is down there in Florida. And I start seeing the day that they argued the motion to send the case back to New York down in Florida, I start seeing headlines. I was Googling it, John Gotti argument transfer case New York. And it's like, judge seems likely to side with Gotti. And I'm like, what? So I call up Ted and I'm like, Ted, what the? How could, no, please. And Ted's like, calm down, Elie. He's like, I was in the courtroom. I could see the judge. They're not sending it up to New York. It's going to stay down here in Florida. I'm like, thank God. 2 weeks later, I get a text from Ted. 4 words. Gotti headed your way.
Surprise.
Right. Judge sends it up to New York. So it lands in my lap. And we did the trial and it hung again. And when we talked to the jurors afterward, it was 6-6. And 6 of them said he's definitely guilty. And 6 of them said, oh, he's guilty, but it's not fair to try a guy 4 times. And you know what? Like, they're kind of right.
Yeah.
So I respect that. Yeah.
That was one of those, like, it was, you want to talk about The Sopranos. It seemed like some of the charges, there was one story about him. Yeah, he had I don't know if you remember, it was a knife attack, and he was like, saying, and
he stabbed the guy when he was like a teenager. Yeah, he stabbed and killed the guy, and then everyone covered up for him.
Yes. And then people would someone I believe ended up hanged.
They killed a guy, and then they tried to make it look like he hung himself from a tree.
Oh, I see.
But if you look at the photos, I mean, it's ridiculous. The branch is so low that the guy's knees are bent. Like, who hangs themselves that way? So yeah, there was No, the guy. Listen, John Gotti Jr. lived for the time he was a criminal in the 80s and 90s, did a lot of horrific things.
Yeah, he was a tough guy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And on that case, so 7 jurors reportedly wanted to get dismissed before the trial began.
God. More than that, probably. Yeah,
it was more than that.
And there's different ways that you can go about, but maybe.
So I guess I don't even have this one right now, but how safe is it? Like, are they just being paranoid, or is it?
Yeah, I mean, in the old day, it is. The Gambino family especially used to tamper with juries, but they would do it more they would threaten, they would leave money, whatever. We proved some of that. Now it's rare. I mean, it's too risky. I think it's too easy to get caught. And no one's going to do anything to a juror. I did a case against a Genovese capo named Angelo Prisco. We charged with murder, and the jury was out deliberating, and we get a note from one of the jurors saying, I want to meet with the judge. And the judge said, okay, this is unusual, but I'll allow it. And so the judge has me and my co-prosecutor and the defense lawyer, not the defendant, not Angelo Prisco, but his defense lawyer, in a little room, and the marshals bring this juror in, and the juror sees us and he goes, no, I just want to talk to you, judge. I don't want the prosecutors here, I don't want the defense lawyer here. And the judge says, I can't do that. They have to be here. And the guy says, well, Judge, we're about to reach a verdict. And the judge says, don't tell me what it is. He goes, okay, we're about to reach a verdict, but I'm too scared. And I was like, well, I think I know where they're going. This is good. Right. Like,
not guilty.
And the judge, right. The judge says, well, I'm telling you, well, this is actually, God, I forgot about this. The judge says, well, I'm going to tell you there's no risk. There's no reason to worry. And he goes, oh yeah, why are we anonymous? Because it was an anonymous jury because Prisco's a dangerous guy. So they weren't James Farley. They were juror number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Yeah.
And the judge is like, but there's no danger to a juror. I mean, if you do convict someone, there's 12 jurors. Like, what are they going to do?
Yeah, for sure.
So
No, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And the judge. So reading, just again going back to the Gotti, there was a judge by the name of Judge P. Kevin Castell from was it Castell?
Castell,
my fault.
Still there. Yep.
Yeah, and so he seemed. What was your experience with him? He seemed very rigid and
he's tough. He's a tough guy. He could get red-faced. He had an explosive temper, but he ran a good trial. He knew what he was doing. He had, I'll tell you 2 quick stories about Castell.
Yeah, sure.
The night before, so I tried a later case with him. Well, let me start with the Gotti case. At the end of the Gotti case, it was a tradition in the SDNY that after a trial, win or lose or hung, you would go meet with the judge, and the judge would spend 10 minutes with you, an hour with you, whatever, talking about, I thought you did this well, I thought this was not so well done, I thought you were, whatever. And it's just a nice tradition. And I went to meet with Castell after the Gotti case, and he said, look, you guys did a really good job. He goes, and I thought you proved his guilt. He goes, but sometimes the jury just tells you that enough is enough. And it's good to have a little humility every now and then. I thought that was a really good lesson from him that I took to heart.
Yeah.
And just it's too much to pile on this much prosecutorial resources. So my second story is a year or so later, I tried another case that happened to go to Judge Castell just by circumstance, by happenstance. And it was 3 defendants. It was the boss of the Genovese family, 2 brothers who were hitmen, Freddie and Ty Gius.
Wow.
And we charged them together with 2 murders that they completed, 2 different people they killed, a 3rd person they shot 9 times who lived, and then 2 other conspiracies. So it was a huge trial. Wow. And so it's 3 defendants, it's 5 murders or murder attempts or conspiracies, it's RICO, it's extortion, it's all this stuff.
Wow.
And the night before the closing argument, the judge goes, who's going to be closing for the government? I was like, that'll be me, Judge. And he goes, how long are you going to do it? Now, I've been working on this closing for months. And I said, Judge, I'm going to be able to close in 3 hours, which I thought was super concise. For all this evidence, 3 hours. And he goes, you got to be kidding me. He goes, you get 90 minutes and that's it. Wow. And I was like panicking. I mean,
that's hard.
Again, I've been working on this. So I went back and I cut to the bone and I got it down to 90 minutes. And it was the best freaking jury argument I ever gave in my life. In fact, in my podcast, I interviewed Murray Richmond, who's 88 years old now and a legendary mob lawyer in New York City and has tried hundreds of cases. And he says on the podcast, that was the best prosecutor closing I ever saw.
That's amazing.
It's on tape.
That's cool.
But Castell forced me to cut it in half the night before, and it worked.
Sometimes that's doing the best work comes out,
you need this forced editing.
Yeah, that is awesome. So after your illustrious career prosecuting organized crime, you, in 2013, you were appointed the director of New Jersey's Division of Criminal Justice by none other than Governor and Chris Christie and former presidential candidate. That had to be a tremendous honor.
Yeah, I mean, Christie had been the U.S. attorney in New Jersey. My wife worked for him for however many years. She was one of his first hires. And whatever one may think of Chris Christie, I know there's sort of polarized opinions. He was always very respectful of and good to the prosecutors who were good at their jobs, including my wife. He played no favorites. I remember he promoted her while she was out on maternity leave. So, not everyone does that,
Yeah.
And through her, when Christie became governor, a whole bunch of people from that office went over and joined him in Trenton. So he became governor in 2009. So this is 4 years, this is into his second, or he was about to run for his second term. I got there in 2012.
Yes. Yeah.
And, through people she knew, this opening came up in charge of a very large agency. It was 550 people in the Division of Criminal Justice. And I put in for it, and they chose me to do it. And it's a very different job, though. I was no longer in courtrooms. I argued one case in front of the New Jersey Supreme Court. But I was much more involved with overseeing cases. We had 1,000 or so cases a year. But also the way it works in Jersey is the AG's office is in charge of all the county prosecutors, the state police, all the cops. So that's different. Like in New York, if the Attorney General of the state of New York tells the DA of Manhattan to do something, the DA can go, pound sand. I don't listen to you.
Right.
In Jersey, they have to listen by law.
Wow.
So I had massive responsibility, and it was sort of a welcome to the real world moment because you're in a bubble when you're a Fed. All you have to worry about is your cases and the courtroom. When I went over to the state, now I'm dealing with cops and unions and police training and body cams and the medical examiner and budgets and hiring and firing and just the media and so much more complex of a job.
Wow. Yeah. What are your hours like in do they end or do they just...
No, I mean, I would say like they were actually, if you just took hours on the clock in the office, there were probably more when I was a Fed because I was getting ready for trials. When you get it, but I would have definitely, the middle of the night calls. There was a police shooting, the, Sunday morning calls. Like you're always kind of on some sort of call at least.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. One of the biggest initiatives for you as the director was you did a huge thing on New Jersey's bail reform system. Yeah. So you got rid of cash bail for low-level offenders, and you implemented risk assessment. So
yes.
For people who aren't lawyers, and I read up on this a little bit, but can you just explain kind of like how the old system worked and what the new system?
So this is the thing I'm most proud of from my time at the AG's office. We used to have a cash-based bail system. Where you remember, if you would have gone into New Brunswick 20 years ago, 15 years ago, you would see bail bonds everywhere. Even I'm sure here in Metuchen, we probably had bail bonds if I think back. Because anyone who got arrested, a judge would set a number. And then if you had enough money, you would post it through a bail bondsman or directly. And then if you could post that money, you get out. And if not, you wouldn't, regardless of risk.
And that was even for murder, right? Like you could do some really bad things.
So theoretically, you could, two problems. One is you had dangerous people who were able to post that money and get out. And two, you had way more people who were not dangerous, who were just poor and couldn't post a few $1,000s and stuck behind bars for months or years waiting for trial. Right. Now, I, along with several other people who were key players at the time, including Chris Christie, had come from the federal system, which is risk-based, which is if you're too dangerous, you can be locked up without bail, and if you're not dangerous, you get released regardless of your money. It's not a perfect system, but it's a much better system. And at that moment, Chris Christie had been a federal prosecutor. He was the U.S. attorney. The Chief Justice, the real hero of the story, is the Chief Justice of our New Jersey Supreme Court, who's still the Chief Justice, Stu Rabner. The Attorney General, John Hoffman, who's now also on the New Jersey Supreme Court. I had come from the feds. And Rabner called us together, this group of 10 or 12, maybe a little more, 15 or so people, and said, we're going to get this done. It's not going to be about Democrat or Republican. It's not going to be about prosecutor or defense lawyer. And we're going to figure out the best system. And we did it, and there was a lot of political obstacles. We got a law passed. We amended the New Jersey state constitution. The bail bonds people tried desperately to stop us. Cops didn't like it. Prosecutors didn't really love it. But we sold it, and it succeeded. It resulted in substantial reductions in our prison population, but at the same time resulted in minor reductions in violent crime because we were able to lock up the most violent people. Now, I will say that's the happy part of it. Right. The unhappy part of it is we thought we were the third state to do this. Mm-hmm. Washington, D.C., a very liberal state district, did it, and Kentucky, a very conservative state, did it. And we thought, well, when we do it in Jersey, that's going to be the tipping point. And a lot of other states were trying to do it. The problem is they went off the rails. New York didn't do it right. There's an op-ed I wrote entitled, New York, You're Doing It Wrong, or something like that. Yeah.
Yes.
And long story short, it largely failed in New York and became political poison. And so now bail reform has become sort of dirty words. The good news is our system is now coming up on 10 years old. It's not going anywhere, and we've improved our system. But the bummer of it is it did not become the model for the nation that we hoped.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong. I remember reading that article you're talking about New York. New York, as far as deciding on bail, is it true that they took into consideration their risk for flight as opposed to the nature of their crime?
So one of the main flaws in their system that I pointed out is they were only allowed to consider, and this is the way the old Jersey system was, only allowed to consider the risk that a defendant will take off, will flee. Not allowed to consider danger.
Wow.
So if I said James Farley is charged with 6 murders, God forbid, but they're like, but he's not going anywhere. He's got kids. He lives here in Metuchen.
I've never been indicted, though.
Yeah, he gave up his passport, whatever. Like, they technically would not be able to lock you up based on that.
Wow.
So, yeah.
That is incredible.
Yeah.
That is incredible. But the results, they were dramatic, and I couldn't believe a lot of this. And I had the percentages, but I cut some of them out. So violent crime dropped exponentially. Jail populations were almost cut in half. Is that correct?
Well, no, pre-trial jail population.
Okay, like the county.
Yeah, not people serving out their times, but people waiting for trial, right? Which is all the county jails.
Yeah.
35% reduction.
That's
which is a lot.
Tremendous. Yeah. Tens of millions in taxpayer savings.
Sure. Yep.
Were you... Any kind of initiative is a bit of a risk. Were you nervous in implementing it, and were you surprised at how effective it was?
I wasn't nervous because I was convinced it was the right thing to do, and we had a real bipartisan, cross-ideological consensus of people who were... It's bizarre to say this because now I see the real world in politics, but this was a rare example of a bunch of people just trying to do the right thing. Nobody benefited. No, we didn't. Did we get it? Did I get anything out of it? Did I get paid anything? Did I get famous off of it? No. Maybe it was good for Chris Christie politically, but that's why we elect people. We want them to do things that are going to be good for them politically. Right. So I firmly believed in it. I don't think I realized just how risky it was until I saw it fail in other states, right? So, I was convinced it was the right thing to do. It was an incredible, I've given, if you look on YouTube, there's a TEDx talk that I gave about it, 15-minute TED, not TED Talk, TEDx Talk, which is the Farm League version of that.
No, yes.
But there was just a remarkable number of political obstacles, legal obstacles that we had to overcome. And it's funny because it got done, and like everything that gets done, it seems like it was a fait accompli, but it certainly was not. There was a million different points it could have failed, but we got it through.
Yeah, that's what a tremendous accomplishment just by everyone involved, and it's really awesome. So after that, so it was about 2018.
Yeah.
You stepped down from your position. I think when like Murphy came in, I think you stayed on for a little bit.
Yeah, I was there for 6 months or so.
6 months. Okay, right. And then you transitioned to CNN to be the senior legal analyst, which is
right. So there's a little bit of an uncertainty in the middle there. So,
okay, yeah, go ahead.
I leave the AG's office. I've now been a prosecutor for 14 years. I did not want to go back to a big firm. I mean, no knock. I just, my kids, who my son.
Sure, yeah.
Were 13 and 11 at the time, and I wanted to be a little more available to them. So I thought, well, maybe I'll take a job and I'll teach for a bit and I'll catch my breath for a year or two, which I did. I took the job at Rutgers, and day 3 of that job, this is the summer when Robert Mueller's Russia investigation was really taking off. Okay. I had friends from the SDNY who had left the SDNY who were doing cable news. They were doing, because every day was somebody got indicted, somebody got subpoenaed, and they said, listen, if you want to do this, we can pass your name on to bookers. I said, yeah, that looks great. And the first hit I ever did was with CNN. Somebody asked me yesterday, what vetting did they do of you? I was like, they made sure I was an actual human who had actually been a prosecutor, and then they threw me on air and hoped for the best. I still laugh with the booker who first booked me. I'm still close with him. He's still there. I enjoyed doing it, and it was fun, and it was exciting. If unpredictable, which of course it's news. Yeah. And towards the end of that summer, I started thinking, some of my friends were starting to get signed by CNN, by MSNBC, by Fox News. And I was doing all 3. And I thought maybe, this is good. They keep bringing me back. And towards the end of that summer, CNN made me an offer. MSNBC made me an offer. And it was a very close decision. As it turns out, I chose correctly. Yeah. I'm thrilled. And I've been with CNN now for coming up on 8 years.
That is amazing.
And let me just say, media years are like dog years times 10.
Yeah.
Right? Like, dog years, 1 to 7 or something? This is like 1 to 70. Yeah.
Yes. When you talked about bail reform before, you had said that the opponents of it would say, acted like the sky was falling. And I say that because I've thought the sky was falling a bunch of times, and I've gone to your clips from CNN to calm me down and put things in a rational state of mind. So you do a fantastic job.
Well, thank you. I mean, look, I definitely try to not be alarmist, right? But I also, there are times when it's required to say, this is outrageous or this is extremely unusual. So I try to keep, the things I try to be are calm and clear and credible. Right, on air, and I don't play partisan politics, as you know.
I know, and I was very good reputation.
I'm not a shill for Trump, but I also don't automatically attack everything the guy does.
Right.
I look at whoever's the person in power making a decision, and I try to assess it critically and fairly.
And so that's actually what you kind of jumped ahead to what I wanted to ask. So 2020, you were very big with the impeachment coverage of President Donald Trump. The two of them, sure, yeah, absolutely, deeply involved. And with those two, with the analysis, and you had mentioned it, not to beat a dead horse over it, but do you ever find it difficult to maintain objectivity? Do you ever have to kind of reframe and go in
I never find it difficult to be objective because I just don't happen to be a strong left or right person. I just don't. I'm not. Even if I never got into media, I think you would find that I'm sort of centrist, moderate. But also, people sometimes sort of misstate it. Like our CEO at CNN, Mark Thompson, did an interview recently, and someone said, "Well, you guys are always sort of looking for the center and trying to, people say we're center left, whatever." But the question was, you guys are always looking for the center. He said, "No, we're not." He said, our job is not to be anywhere on the left or right spectrum. Our job is we're outside of the spectrum observing and describing what's happening.
Yeah.
But we're not trying to place ourselves on it. Right. And that's how I look at it. And so you can't do this job if you're letting your own feelings influence your analysis. You're there to explain to people. And if you love Donald Trump and think everything he does is fine and legal and constitutional, and that guides your legal analysis is going to be crap. And same thing if you hate Donald Trump and you think that everything he does is automatically wrong and unconstitutional and everything anyone does to get him is automatically good and fine, your analysis is also going to be crap. So I do it because that's how I am, but I was encouraged from day one at CNN, and I've gotten almost no, people go, do they coach you? Do they this? No. The only thing I've ever gotten from the bosses and the decision makers at CNN is you keep calling it straight and fair, and that's it. And that's served me well. At times it's earned me vitriol from the left or the right, but that's fine. I can take it.
And you don't need me to say this, but just around town stuff and just everyone I talk to, you have a very good reputation of calling it down the middle, and you're very good at your job.
Well, you see, I mean, even just at the gym, right? There's guys there who are very, very love Trump very, very much, and there's people there who want to come up to me and talk about Trump's ending the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I'm friends with all of them.
and that's the way you got to go in these days.
Yep.
Yeah, no, but excellent with that. And so going back to 2021, and I thought this was really interesting because I'm assuming you had to work on a lot of this during the lockdown. While I myself, I was learning how to make sourdough. I think I practiced beatboxing.
Oh, gosh. Yeah. Okay, I got
you.
Go ahead.
Meanwhile, you're writing a book, Hatchet Man, which is very cool. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So the book is called Hatchet Man, How Bill Barr Broke the Prosecutor's Code and Corrupted the Justice Department, referring to the second 2 years, the guy who was AG during the second 2 years of Trump's first term in office.
Right.
And the funny thing is, I had, for a while I had talent agents. I was with one of the big talent agencies, but it's totally unnecessary. Like for me, I mean, I'm a lawyer. I can negotiate my own contract. So I dropped them, respectfully. It was fine. And for a while, they had me with a literary agent trying to shop book ideas. And we got a couple nibbles, but nothing came through. And I got a DM, a direct message through Twitter during COVID that summer saying it was 17 words. And I quote it in the acknowledgments to that book. But it was something like, I see you on TV. Would you be interested in writing a book about Bill Barr? I'm with a publisher. I'm not an agent. And I realized, I Googled the guy, Eric Nelson. He's been now my publisher, my editor for all 3 books with HarperCollins. And I realized, oh crap! So it turns out he was the editor for a colleague at one of our anchors at CNN. So I called him, and he goes, "Yeah, call him back. That's the decision maker." And we did it on ourselves. We've now done 3 books in 5 years. I wrote it in the room we are sitting in right now, and yeah. I just got to tell you a quick story because you're making me think back to COVID.
I love this, yeah.
So during the early days of COVID, we started doing these home shots, right? Because you couldn't go into the studio, right? So they sent us, here's a Cisco link, and here's a mic, and here's a what are those lights, ring lights, so you'll look good, and set it up in your home and whatever. So I would do my shots here, but I would always warn my kids. So this is 2020, so they were 15 and 13 or something. And I would say, guys, so I would try to do them up on the 3rd floor of the house. So one time I was getting ready to do Don Lemon's show. So this is 10 or 10:30 at night. Cool. Yeah. And they go, man, they're like, Elie, your Wi-Fi kind of sucks. Can you get closer to it? Now, the Wi-Fi thingy is here on the first floor.
Yeah.
So I said, yeah, this is 5 minutes. And I told the kids, I said, guys, I'm going up on the third floor to do a hit, so stay off the third floor. They're like, fine. But this is 5 minutes before the hit. So I go, okay, I'm gonna run down here. So I sat right here, this seat right here, turned the camera, so the camera's facing that way into my living room. But I forgot to tell my kids I was moving down to the first floor because it was just a couple minutes, right? But I did it to get it better. So the Wi-Fi is better at this point. So we're doing the segment, and I hear my son click, 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 coming down those steps right there, and I'm like thinking to myself, "Oh shit!" Right? Like I forgot to tell him, and the camera's facing back into the living room here, and I can't get his. I'm on air. I'm talking to Don, and I see him in my shot. You can see your shot. And I see him walk into my shot. He's 15 years old, wearing pajama pants and no shirt. And he goes right there. He's flat in the middle of the shot. And you can hear me. I'm sitting in the chair. I go like this. Like I'm snapping my fingers. And he realizes what's going on. And he runs out of the room. And I'm like, oh my God. When it was over, I was like, oh no. And at the end, I said, hey guys, can I talk to the control room real quick? And they're like, sure. And I'm like, I can't believe that just happened. Like, what? Like, my son walked right into the shot with no shirt on. They're like, he did? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, we're watching it back. They're like, oh, we put up a graphic right at that moment as I was talking. It was like something about Joe Biden. And it was like, so, they'll cut to a graphic. So for that 10 seconds, they cut to a graphic of Joe Biden or something. And I was like, thank God. So anyway, he didn't get his moment of fame.
If ever there could have been a clip though that defines the pandemic, right?
Oh, that happened. People, there's all sorts of clips of people with like kids running in or dogs running in and stuff. Yeah.
Well, I taught during the pandemic virtually, and I could go on about parents and kids, and it was a mess. So you've banged out 3 books in 5 years. Incredible. I love the When You Come at the King. I'm a big Wire fan.
Yeah,
so I'm assuming that's.
I did take that from Omar.
Oh yeah,
who took it from Machiavelli and Ralph Waldo Emerson and others. But Omar said it best.
Yeah, he said it best.
Sure.
You best not miss.
Yeah.
So I mean that's a lot of writing. If you had not become a lawyer, is there any chance you just would have been an author?
I don't know. I don't know what my in would have been. I mean, I'm not like some fiction, capable of writing good fiction or anything.
Right.
I'm sure that I would have used my writing skills in the legal world, and I'm sure I would have been. Oh well, you said if I didn't become a lawyer. No, I don't know that I would have had enough of a area of expertise or an in to do it. But writing is sort of the universal skill. I mean, I tell my students it's the single most important skill you have, no matter what you do. I also tell my students like, don't think of writing only as well. I have an essay due or I have a paper due. Like any presentation of thoughts, what you're doing right now is a writing exercise. You've done your research. You're not reading off a script, but you've thought about what topics you want to ask me in what orders. That's a writing exercise. Sure, so I tell my students, no matter what you do in life, you need to think about the writing of it, the presentation of thoughts.
Yeah, no, absolutely, for sure. So before going into and this was just off the cuff, because I'm curious. Yeah. Before going into law, and you said initially when you were young, you did not want. You're still young, but younger. You didn't want to go into law. Did you have any aspirations for any other profession?
I wanted to be in psychology because
I can see that.
Well, my mom was a social worker. And I took a really fun and interesting psych class in high school at Cherry Hill East. Okay. And then it was as simple as when I got to Rutgers, I took a psychology class that was boring. I had a boring professor. And I took a poli-sci / criminal justice class with Milt Human that was electrifying, and that was it. But that's the way things can just turn on a random happen. If I had a cruddy poli-sci professor and a great psych professor, I'd maybe be giving people psychological counseling.
People would still be paying to get out of jail, and it just wouldn't. Exactly. The world would be different. Right. 2020, what a busy year. I don't know how you...
Which one?
In 2021, I'm just saying, all of your years are insanely busy, but it's just you put together some insane projects. One of them, the Emmy Award nominated documentary on the Eichmann trial, right. 60th anniversary. Definitely in the conversation for the worst human being of all time, by the way. You interviewed... Gabriel Bach, and investigator Michael Goldman, Gilead. Yeah, I did not want to mispronounce it. You are the grandson of Holocaust survivors.
Right.
Now, what I want to ask is, what did this project mean to you personally?
So I'm so proud of this one. I've now done 3 of these sort of mini documentaries for CNN, including one just the other day, which we'll talk about. But so yes, both of my father's parents were Holocaust survivors. Polish Jews lost their entire families to the war. Parents, siblings, everything. My grandma lived till 2008. I knew her well. She would never talk about it. It was a nightmare. She didn't want to relive it. And my grandfather, who I'm named after, that's how I got this. My full name is Eliezer.
Yeah.
He died in 1960, so of course I never met him. But he, survived the Holocaust and then died after that. I barely remember even the sequence of events, but I was invited to an event where Gabriel Bach was the speaker. And at the time, he was in his early 90s, and his family had to flee the Nazis. They kept moving around one step ahead. They barely avoided them.
Yes.
And he ended up as one of the prosecutors in the trial of Adolf Eichmann. If people don't know, Adolf Eichmann was the Nazi, quote, logistics coordinator. Logistics meaning the moving of millions of Jews on cattle cars to their deaths. So he's a villain and a monster. And when Bach was in his 30s, he's a young guy. If you see the photos, it's in the piece. I mean, he's a young, handsome guy doing this trial. It was the first ever worldwide televised trial. There's famous images. Eichmann, they kidnapped, they found him in Argentina. He was in hiding.
Yes.
The Israelis basically abducted him, took him back to Jerusalem.
So awesome.
Right, the
So
image of him
awesome.
in the box, in the plexiglass box.
Yeah.
And the whole world watched this thing. And so I had this opportunity to interview Gabriel Bach, and then I found Michael Goldman, who he himself, similar to my grandparents, had lost his whole family, Polish Jews also. He survived. He actually was in Auschwitz. He survived the worst of the worst. And he became one of the lead investigators on the case. He interrogated Eichmann. And so I interviewed both of them. We sort of wove in my family history. And it was such an honor to speak with them. It was so remarkable. They had so many wonderful stories. And Goldman, there's a photo of Goldman that we put in the piece where he's sitting at the trial table and he's got his prisoner number on his forearm. I think it's his left forearm. His sleeves are rolled up to his elbow, and he's this tough Israeli guy with wavy dark hair. Now he's about to turn 100. Yeah. And I asked him, I said, did you roll your sleeves up like that and put your arms on the table in that way, like on purpose? And he said, oh yeah. I wanted to send a message. But Gabriel Bach has passed away since I interviewed him. I believe I was the last. I know I was the last interview he ever gave. And the piece lives on. It's 15 minutes long. It's not a super long piece. Well, for CNN, it's very long.
Yeah, sure.
But you can watch that online, and I was just like immensely proud that I was able to do that piece. I did that piece. Then I did a piece on another guy named Elie Honig, who reached out to me, who was, long story short, who was not related, but he was saved from the Nazis as a baby. His mom was pregnant with him and in France, and the Nazis came in and killed everyone. His father, who he never met.
Who was a soldier? The father was a soldier, apparently.
Yes.
Yeah, too.
They killed his father, his extended 9 or 10 of his relatives, and their French Christian neighbors, women primarily, risked their lives to hide Ellie's mother, who was pregnant with him, in the countryside. They put her in a monastery, and then she had him, and then they hid him for 2 years till the end of the war, and then they reunited. I mean, it's a miraculous story. So, both of those I'm hugely proud of. And then the recent one I did, I interviewed a woman named Melba Beals, who is now 84 years old. She was one of the Little Rock Nine who, when she was 15 years old, she was one of the 9 black students who integrated Little Rock Central High School, broke the color barrier, and President Eisenhower, Dwight D. Eisenhower, had to invoke the Insurrection Act, use the military to protect them, to get them through the angry mobs. And she's a marvel, and that piece just aired a bunch of times a couple weeks ago. So yeah, love doing those pieces.
That's amazing, and you. So in my notes, you got you hit
I'm
3
ahead,
pages
sorry.
right there. No, it's great. That's excellent. So and you said and you mentioned President Dwight D. Eisenhower, the Insurrection Act. When you hear modern political figures discuss invoking that same law, how do you? What do you think about the comparison?
Well, one of the points of doing this piece, and I asked Melba in the piece, is the Insurrection Act should be reserved for emergencies where there's no other option. And in that case, in the 50s, the U.S. Supreme Court decided Brown versus Board of Education in 1954, which ended segregation. Well, was supposed to end segregation, end what they called Jim Crow laws, separate but equal. However, some southern cities and states actively resisted. And fast forward 3 years later, okay, it's not like Brown versus Board of Education was decided and we were this desegregated Nirvana with everyone, you know.
The band? No, right.
right. So the governor of Arkansas, a guy named Orville Faubus, was so dead set on preventing black students from going to the high school that he deployed the Arkansas National Guard to block them. And Eisenhower said this can't be because the Supreme Court has made this decision. We can't allow states to defy it. And so I'm going to basically one-up you and bring in he brought in the 101st Airborne of the U.S. Army to escort Melba and the 8 other students in. And so I think that's I think sometimes we can understand what's happening now by looking back at history. And I think everyone agrees was a valid, justified use of the Insurrection Act. I think Trump has not actually invoked the Insurrection Act, but he's threatened to.
Right,
and I think to say, well, crime rates are high and therefore Insurrection Act, I think would be wrong. I think would be at odds with the purpose of that law.
Yeah, no, good. Yeah, well said.
And she says something similar in the piece.
Yes, I did see it. Was and good work on that as well. Bringing this home here, and this is man, the time flies speaking with you, man. This is really fun. Yeah, it's awesome. I could go and just for anyone listening, all of these things I cut out. So you talk about cutting out. I cut out so much that I was like, oh yeah, you gotta compact it where you can.
Yeah.
But you've prosecuted mob bosses. You reformed bail systems. You analyzed presidential impeachments, written best-selling books. I didn't even mention you have a podcast up against the mob, which is also awesome.
Yeah, if you want to hear more mob stories, it's out there on Apple or whatever, or Spotify. Yeah,
you've done a few things in your career, I guess, is what I'm going to say. Just a ton of consequential work. What still motivates you? Like, what are you've accomplished so much. What makes you say,
I love doing this. This is so much fun to be able to go on TV and explain brand new important stories as they break. Yeah. To get a Supreme Court opinion that comes down at 10:04 and to be like, at 10:08, like giving I haven't absorbed but explaining the big picture of what happened, to be covering the trial of Donald Trump, to be covering impeachments, to be covering what just happened. Just think, all right, I'll give you the last couple months, okay? Since the year broke, since 2026, the arrest of Nicolas Maduro happened on Saturday, January 3rd. Right. So explaining that, we went right into Minnesota with all the ICE stuff in Minnesota, the fatal shootings. Overlapping all of it was Jeffrey Epstein, right? And the Epstein files and all of that. We had the Supreme Court case on the tariffs. We've had so much to be able to explain this, to write about it for New York Magazine, to explain it at CNN, to talk about it with my students. What could be better? I love doing it. It's very simple motivation.
Yeah, and
if I get tired of it, look, there are days. This past Friday, I was on for 18 hours. I got picked up here at 5 in the morning. I got home at 11 at night and was on, every whatever. And by the last one, I guess I was feeling pretty good that day. But there's days like that where when it comes time for your 7th hit of the day and it's 10 o'clock at night, you're tired. But it's like, who gets to do this job? Like, how lucky are you to do it? So you find a way. But yeah, if I ever find myself getting bored or worn down by it, that'll be my sign to leave.
And then that's and Elie, like this again, I could talk to you forever, but this was so awesome, to interview someone who's accomplished as much as you have, and a senior analyst for CNN, and just this is amazing. It's kind of a dream come true, and for you to do my little thing here, and it's so cool.
So 2 quick things. So thank you, James. You did a great job with this. You really prepped. It shows. This is awesome.
Thank you.
You're very good at this. Yeah. Maybe you'll move up my ranking of the Farley brothers, the 4 of you, or the 3 of you.
I'll be in the top 3, hopefully.
I'm going to just finish with a quick Metuchen story.
Let's do it. So, let's go.
I showed you before my studio that I have in the 3rd floor of my house.
It's a beautiful studio.
And so people love this because when I do it, the locator will say Metuchen, and so people take pride in it in the town. Yeah. So John Bush, our mayor, you must know.
Sure,
right?
Of course,
Who's a very good friend of mine.
Nice guy.
Says to me one day, he goes, if we got you, sometimes, as I showed you, some of the shows will have a specific show background. Here's the background for AC 360. But other shows will just say, put up a cityscape, right? I have various New York City skyline shots, and if it's night, you put on a night one. If it's day, you put on a day one. So John goes, if we got you a really good photo, high-res photo of Metuchen downtown, do you think you could do that? And I was like, maybe. Let's try it. So somehow, I don't know how John accomplishes all this. He accomplishes so much, and he gets stuff done. So a couple weeks later, he goes, here we go. And it's this beautiful drone shot of our downtown, of Main Street.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so get this. So a few weeks after that, I'm doing a mid-afternoon hit. And the mid-afternoon show from my house, and the mid-afternoon show doesn't have a set background. So I'm like, I'm going to try it. So I put on the Metuchen background behind me, right? And so they're checking me in, and it's 5 minutes before that. I'm like, oh, man, we're going to do it. this is gonna work. And I'm like not saying anything, and I'm like, come on. And they're counting me down, like, okay, commercial break, and then we'll get to you, 90 seconds after we come back. And I'm like, all right. And I'm like, this is gonna happen. And then the executive producer gets in my earpiece, who I'm good friends with, and she goes, Elie, where are you? Sesame Street? And I said,
Sunny
what do you mean?
days.
I said, this is my town. It says Metuchen. Why does it say Metuchen? Then we have building, skyscrapers behind me. She goes, can you please go over to New York Scape? And I'm like, all right. So we were 90 seconds away. I still have it. Maybe I'll try. Maybe I'll try some other day.
That's a great story. Yeah.
Anyway.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you for
Yep.
that. Elie, this was a pleasure, man. Seriously. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. This
All
was
right.
really awesome.
Good job.
Yeah. Very good. Thank you very much.